Okay. Hello, everybody. We're going to start with a beautiful grounding practice, a focusing practice with my friend Juan Carlos, who lives in San Salvador. He's a focusing oriented therapist, beautiful human being. So we're really lucky to have Juan Carlos with us, and he's going to do the practice Espanol, in Spanish. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm the grounding in Spanish, but open your heart and your mind for this moment. Vamos a tomar 3 respiraciones profundas. Una vez más. Una vez más. Vamos a pasar nuestra conciencia desde el tope de nuestra cabeza, por todo nuestro cuerpo, recorriendo sus diferentes partes, ojos, nariz, boca, cuello, pecho, estómago, nuestros genitales, nuestras piernas, nuestros pies. Y agradecemos por estar aquí. Agradecemos por ser parte de este planeta. Agradecemos por la oportunidad de ser conscientes. Y expandimos nuestro ser hacia todos los seres que necesitan acompañamiento, que necesitan amor, que necesitan salud, que necesitan presencia. Recogemos toda esa energía y la colocamos en nuestro corazón. Y desde esta sensación de estar aquí, I invite you everyone for open your eyes, see each other, and say hello. And we are ready for this meeting.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. So delighted to present Marika Heinrichs, who's joining us from Guelph, Ontario in Canada. And Marika, do you want to introduce yourself? And then you're going to do a sharing for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have time to be with you and to ask questions and to share together. Marika is muted.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan Carlos. That was beautiful. I'm Marika. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Attawandaron peoples, and part of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, which is a treaty agreement between the settlers and Indigenous peoples of this land. And I always get so excited about teaching and have so many things that I want to say. So I'm going to try and really not overdo it, because I think oftentimes it's when we keep things simpler that they're more profound. But I always feel like I want to say so much, and I get so excited sharing with other practitioners. So hopefully we can have some Q&A and discussion. I'm going to tell you a little tiny bit about myself, and then I'm going to invite us into some practice, and then I'm going to do a little bit more talking. If at any point you have questions or need me to repeat something, feel free to just pop a little comment or question into the chat, and I'll try and get to it as I'm going, or I'll get to it afterwards. The important things to know about me, I suppose, in this context are that I practice as a psychotherapist. I have a private practice, working primarily with queer and trans people. And I also teach a weekly group. I hold a community practice space that's called the Wild Body Circle. And that's a space where we really practice embodiment in community together. And it's really feels like very dear to my heart work, because I feel really committed and passionate about teaching body-based skills and practices, nervous system education. I feel really passionate about teaching that stuff to people. I don't think you should have to be able to afford a private therapist to be able to learn about the wisdom of your body. And I think we all carry and hold this wisdom. It's part of our birthright. And it feels really important to me to disseminate that knowledge and wisdom and information in as accessible ways as possible. So I really love doing that group. And one of the things about it that's so special is that because we're practicing in a group, we get to harness the magic of co-regulation. And so I actually wanted to share one of the practices that we often do in that group with all of you. So I always like to remind people that anything that I share is an invitation and is optional. So please primarily listen to yourself. If your own body is not feeling it, or needs to adapt or adjust or make something different for a practice to feel more accessible, we're all people who work with trauma, so we know that choice is incredibly important when it comes to working with the body. So please listen to yourself. And if you find that just doing this in a slightly different way works better for you, then go for it. And if you're not feeling it and you just want to listen and observe, that's also a really beautiful form of participation. So yeah, please do what you need. So my invitation is that we're going to just practice some nonverbal kind of orienting to each other in this space. And so we're going to divide into two groups and just do a little bit of an embodied kind of shaping trade back and forth. So if you are a person who is born between January and June, so the first 6 months of the year, your role in this first round is that you are going to communicate with your body language that you are, open and available and extending a sense of connection and care outwardly to others. So communicating through your facial expressions, through your body language, like, hi, I'm here, I want to connect. And if you are a July to December baby, then your role is going to be to just receive that, to just notice the faces and bodies on the screen and practice really taking in this kind of like extension of connection and care being offered to you. And then we're going to switch. And just observing as we're moving through these, just noticing what comes up. So much often comes up when we're playing with connection in the body. So if this feels like weird or strange, like, then congratulations, you're normal. And yeah, it's just an opportunity for us to kind of get to experiment and really bring our bodies into the space, as well as our very smart minds. So I'll invite January to June, that includes me. And so we're going to start by extending connection in whatever way that means for you. And then those of you who are the second half of the year, just receiving, modeling with your body language that you are receiving connection. So just begin whenever you're ready. You can maybe extend your arms out in front of you, or drop your shoulders and widen across your heart, opening your hands, whatever way your body wants to convey this. And just take your time. And receivers, just pause and notice how this is for you. Maybe scanning between the different faces on the screen. Letting your eyes look wherever they want to look. Okay, and in a moment, we're going to pause and we're going to switch. So letting that go. Maybe just shaking it off a little bit, orienting to your space a little. And then we'll return and take on whichever is the opposite role. So if you are a receiver, you're going to extend connection. And if you're extending connection, you're going to practice receiving connection. You begin whenever you're ready. And just continue to let your eyes look where they want to look. Notice any body sensations, also any thoughts or emotions that might be showing up. Welcoming all of it. And then when you're ready to let that go, we'll let that go. Thank you. If you want to share in the chat a word or two that comes up to describe the sensations or the mood of that experience, feel free. Maybe it brought up some skepticism or some tenderness. I prefer giving than receiving. Yeah, usually we find one easier than the other. Yeah, it can also bring up a lot of grief or fear, energizing, heartfelt across the oceans, warmth. Yeah. Softening and warming. Noticed some fear, shame rumbling in the background. Yeah. Connection. My heart broke. Heartwarming connection. Beautiful. Yeah. So powerful. Yeah, interesting to do this in the virtual world. Yeah. So this is really the principle of polyvagal, right? Our bodies are wired to recognize connection. We are designed to notice each other's faces and body language and expression. I'm imagining that many of us are feeling in a slightly different, state in our bodies from before that exercise, and no words were spoken. So a really beautiful way actually to follow up a centering practice in Spanish that may be some of our first language, and it may be a language that we're not familiar with, but it kind of doesn't matter. And so words are both so powerful, and also there are so many ways of communicating. So what I wanted to share beyond this was one of the tools that I find really, really supportive and kind of is like an anchor point that I come back to a lot in my practice, and that I think offers us some really helpful wisdom in terms of working with collective and structural and systemic trauma. So this is a principle, or I guess kind of a principle that is called blending. And blending came to me through the lineage of generative somatics, which some of you might be familiar with. It's also used or talked about in the Strozzi, through the Strozzi Institute, and generative somatics is connected to the Strozzi Institute and methodology of somatic practice. The Strozzi Institute is a somatic training space organization that's based out of Petaluma, California. And blending came to Strozzi through the lineage and the teachings actually of Aikido, which is a non-combative martial art that was developed by a man named Morihei Ueshiba in Japan in the 1920s and 30s. And it kind of follows a principle that I think a lot of spiritual traditions, a lot of embodied practice traditions teach, which is that it's by acceptance and acknowledging what is that transformation becomes possible. And when I think about systems of domination and supremacy and the embodied experience of those systems, the kind of like fundamental aspect or quality of those systems is this kind of like need to override our bodies. That when we live inside of racialized capitalism, we don't necessarily get to say, I'm tired and I'm sick, I want to stay home from work today. Or like, I'm grieving and I'm sad, I can't go to work, or I need to rest, I don't feel well. We don't get to have the full range of choices that we need in order to live whole integrated lives. And so on a certain level, we're all kind of pulled into overriding our implicit embodied cues, whether that's like from a young age being taught to sit and like wait to go to the bathroom in school, right? Like having to hold your like need to go to the washroom, such a like controlled, disciplined kind of way of relating to ourselves, or holding in our emotions, or having like a stiff upper lip, or there's all these kind of like cultural connotations to this that have so much to do with systems and structures. And we can forget that there's even another way. We can forget that that's actually like that there are choices and processes and histories that created that kind of shaping and way and cultural way of being in a body. So, and, depending on our relationship to resources and to power and to privilege and to safety, we get to have more or less choice. So some of us might actually get to take a sick day when we don't feel well. And that's a gift. That should be the way that it is for everyone, but not everyone has that option, right? So we're all kind of impacted by these systems in different intersecting ways. And some of us are more or less impacted than others. And that's also an important part of kind of what we're contending with. So blending is really powerful because instead of saying like your body is wrong and bad, it's actually saying, oh, of course, this is what you're doing. This totally makes sense. And finding the wisdom inside of that, clenching or tightening or numbing, and just listening deeply for, whatever it is that it has to share and let us know about, why that is the thing to do in this moment. So I just want to share a little embodied practice to kind of illustrate this principle, and then maybe we can kind of move into some discussion about it. So I'm going to invite you to make a fist. And inside of this fist, you're going to imagine that there's something very precious to you. And you might know what that thing is. Like if you're like a literal person, you might want to put you might want to name what that precious thing is, but you might also not need to. Your body might just know, oh, there's something precious. Okay. And you're going to protect that. We protect what's precious. That's what our bodies do. So holding on to this precious thing, we're going to take our other hand and we're going to try as hard as we can to get to that precious thing that our fist is protecting. And as much as possible, try to make our fist not be a fist. So you can try that now. And just notice how the hand that's in a fist, just notice how it responds when you try to do this. How does it respond to you trying to pull it apart? When you feel like you've got a good sense of that, you can let that go. Maybe a couple of people can drop into the chat. What did you notice happening in your hand when you were doing that? How did your hand respond? Resistance, resists, resistance, rigidity, clench, tension. Hand felt stronger, tighter, first urge to let go, wouldn't give in or let go. Polarized, effortlessly strong. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Tension stronger. Yeah. So kind of doubles down. I always notice that I get like these little grooves from my fingernails digging into my palm. I've demonstrated this so many times, but my body always, it's just like it knows, right? So we're going to do that one more time. We're going to place our precious thing in the same hand and hold it into a fist. And this time we're going to take our other hand and we're going to support the fist to do its job. So we're going to, either basically you want to bring this second hand onto your fist exactly how your fist wants to be supported. So you might want to hold it and help it move in the direction it's moving in. So you might want to just softly lay it over top and just hold it. Really let your fist tell you how it wants to be met, how it wants to be supported. And just stay here for a few breaths. You can make adjustments if you need to. And when you're ready to let that go, you can let that go. And then maybe we can get you to share again in the chat how you noticed that time was different or what you noticed in your fist. The second round of this practice. How did your fist respond? It softened. The fist wanted to be massaged to gently get it opened. It was more relaxed, connected, gentle. No pressure to open or relax. It went in and out, wrapped, loosening into, relax. Tension began to leave my fist. Softened while being held. Company. Friendly hands. So many relational words. I can't remember who said this in my life, and I wish I could because I really like to attribute to people, but someone very smart who I know said, there is no such thing as self-regulation. All regulation is co-regulation. We learn how to self-regulate through co-regulation. And the relationship to ourselves is a relationship. So when we meet ourselves with this supportive fist of saying, of course, how can I, tell me what you need. When we tend and befriend, that is a relationship. And so on this fundamental level, it is our relationship to ourselves that then creates the sort of framework for the relationships that we have with each other and with our communities. And also it kind of goes the other way. If we have those strong, solid relationships with our communities, it helps us to develop, sturdy relationships with ourselves. And so this very simple principle really follows that when we notice, and this is something, if there are body workers in the space, I'm sure you're familiar with, but if we notice that there is like an area of contraction or tension in the body, it is not my belief that the way that we soften or change that is to pry it open or to like force the muscles into a different shape. We would like often listen and support and in fact even create support the contraction to do what it's doing by adding weight or contact or pressure, or simply sitting with it. Some of my training is in biodynamic craniosacral work, and like we will just sit with what is for a very long time. And so this to me is such a powerful principle that can be illustrated so quickly, and that is like totally paradigm shifting, because it makes us realize how often we spend telling ourselves to be different than we are, and how many of us have grown up inside of that and still live inside of that. And so for this principle of acknowledging our shaping, our state, and this applies to the autonomic state as well, right? Oh, I'm having like a fight response. That, how can I name that and acknowledge that? And then match that, right? I need to push, I need to run, I need to shake. And rather than just spending the whole day being like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? Why can't I just be calm? Why can't I just get over it? So unhelpful. So that's blending. I don't want to do too much over talking about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will share a little handout about this little principle that I've shared today I guess I can just share it in the discussion group in a PDF. So, and my contact information will be on there. So if you want to reach out or follow up, yeah, I'd be happy to connect anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Silent clapping.
That was lovely, powerful. Learning about somatics. So comments, questions? Do people work like this in the body? Oh, raised hands, where are they? Ah, Gareth? You're muted.
I really loved the fist doing that, and it was something that new. It was familiar, but something new. It felt familiar to David Hawkins' map of consciousness, and I can't remember what that is, when the energy levels, and it felt familiar to that, but it was something that I'd not heard of with that kind of, and I felt the tension and the resistance, and that feels like when people are experiencing trauma, there's that tension, isn't there? And then the reconnection to the self, and just that kind of, it just felt more connected, and you could almost, if I stayed a bit longer with it, the easing of that tension, I could feel it, and that was really good. And working, I come from Leicester, working in the NHS, it's something using as a tool as well with clients in that emergency moment as well, to be able to use as a tool, which was particularly when thoughts are so much domineering over body sensations, because you can't get out of that headspace sometimes. So yeah, it was great. It was fantastic.
Mm.
Can I ask a question or talk? So Marika, I'm Andrea, and I got into all this line of work after having a lot of chronic illness for a long time. And a lot of people with chronic illness are just end up hating their body, like they hate the disease. And so as I've discovered some more of these techniques, I pop into some of these Facebook groups, like there's a SIBO group, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And I tried today to say something like this, that it wasn't until I sat and befriended my body and because she talked about her the bacteria in her gut as being an abusive relationship. And she, you know, every time I try to do something to heal and it comes back and I feel like I'm being abused, and I try to say this, and it's hard to get this point across when people are in chronic pain. And they, you know, been told their whole life that, oh, if you do this one protocol, and I did every protocol that was out there. And it wasn't until I started embracing some of the things that you were saying that I really started to heal. You know, I mean, I just felt like something was always wrong. So I had to get something out there. So I was looking for something to change myself. So do you have any, you know, more advice for those of us who, you know, I'm a believer now because that happened to me and I can tell my story, but I still, especially young people, when they're in the throes of this, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear sit with it. They don't want to hear that acceptance. They don't want to hear start loving your gut problems, start loving all these things about you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate it. And I work with a lot of folks who have chronic pain as well. And also when it comes to, you know, dealing with like embodied responses to oppression, what are we saying? Like, just like learn to like love that this is happening. Like, but I think, you know, as practitioners, we're not saying sit with it. It's so much in our delivery. And it may be that this kind of place of like really meeting something as it is, and even finding kind of like love and care for it, is not the starting point for people. It might be a starting point with finding somewhere that's just neutral. Is there somewhere that like isn't in pain, or somewhere that's like, you know, like a 2 out of 10, and working with like cultivating that, because we have to be so sensitive to like, of course, there is like this terrible paradox where, especially with the way that like chronic pain and chronic illness gets like looped into our neural pathways, that we don't want to be invalidating. We want to be like, of course, that's what happens in the body over time. That makes so much sense with like inflammation and stress. So this is where like tons of psychoeducation can be really helpful. Like, I'm not, you know, rather than having it feel like another healthcare provider who's offering some invalidating, like, just get over it, that explaining the principles and ideas around where this comes from, and then supporting building, like, can your pinky toe feel neutral? Can we like build that into like, you know, a slightly larger area? And learning, what I find with folks who have a lot of like high activation and like chronic pain is learning to find like neutral, more like, you know, resourcing sensations that are either through like external to the body, and then beginning with like the periphery, that starts to shift and change the like other kinds of like distressing pain responses and like chronic illness flare-ups. You don't have to go directly to the source. So this is, yes, I taught something that's like directly, but we don't always need to do that. But yeah, what I would say is like, more than anything, we have to have deep reverence as practitioners for how this stuff works and for the body, because sometimes we are the orienting point to that principle with our clients before they're necessarily there. We have to be like, I deeply trust that there is health and aliveness inside of the system, and that there is resilience, even if the people we work with are not necessarily there yet, which is, you know, of course they're not always, that's totally understandable, but yeah. A couple of folks have asked if they can share this practice with clients, and I'm happy for you to share it. It's actually a practice I learned from Stacey Haynes. Stacey Haynes is one of the developers of generative somatics. She wrote a book called The Politics of Trauma. She's one of my teachers. And so you're welcome to share it. You're welcome to mention that you learned it from me and I learned it from her.
It's a wonderful book. If people haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Wonderful book, The Politics of Trauma. We have a practice in focusing and focusing-oriented therapy where we look for, we call it clearing space backwards. So clearing space is step one, but if you're in a lot of pain, emotionally or physically, we clear space backwards. So you would look for a little part in the body that feels okay. It might be like the tip of your nose, you know, or an earlobe. And then we bring attention to that part and try to kind of hang out there a little bit. All these wonderful ways. Mhm. Do a lot of people here work with chronic pain? Yeah. Audrey? Yeah.
Yeah, particularly gut issues, like you were saying. Thank you for asking that question, Andrea, because I'm thinking of a client in particular with very debilitating gut issues and a strong disconnection from the body. So I have to work very gently and at tiny bits at a time.
Mhm.
Well, I was very disconnected to my body for years because my gut issues. In fact, I was originally diagnosed with gastroparesis like 30 years ago, which meant feeding tubes and things like that. That's what they wanted to do to you. And they put me on a medicine that created depression. And I had to work my way out of that. And it was a journey. And the anxiety is related. So my whole journey started with gut issues. But then I realized the anxiety was tied in there. And eventually I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And oftentimes those of us who are going to be diagnosed with an autoimmune disease start off with unexplained issues. And back then they didn't know what they were doing. So it's been a 30-year journey for me, but I'm so thankful for this journey because I never would have discovered all these beautiful, practices that have been so healing. That makes so much more sense to me. And now I can share with people. So
Yeah.
I love my journey and I
Oh, we
kinda
look
crazy.
forward to hearing about it next time.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah. How do people feel in their bodies if you kind of check in with how were you when you first came into the room? And how do you feel now inside? I feel this kind of calming, leveling, being together, kind of warmth. Anybody get really sleepy? Yeah. Gareth, did you want to say something?
Yeah, because there's so many like-minded people around the world, it feels more connected. It's quite stressful at the moment, obviously, with what's going on in the NHS as well, and it was I've had a kind of busy day, which was quite stressful. And so it's nice to come into, and particularly, I think I said last time, was it's wonderful to hear so many people polyvagal informed, and I'm wanting to kind of so passionate about it to get it out in, particularly in mental health in the NHS, and it just goes over people's heads, and it feels frustrating because I can see it happening, a nervous system response. It doesn't matter whether you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, and I don't like diagnosis. I see it from a different platform.
Yeah.
And it just feels like you're kind of a bit alone in that respect. And because I'm training counselor, doing the person-centered approach, and working with male survivors of sexual abuse on placement, and just seeing the power of just finished my first full therapy with someone. But there was that session going along because you have to have your own personal therapy as well as part of the course. And I went through my own stuff, and I got to that point where you're literally crying about stuff. And then a couple of weeks later, it was the session from a client. And everybody says, trust the process. And I felt the process. I could see it, this vulnerability with my client, and that he felt safe enough to be able to do that with me. And it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And we miss that in the NHS, the time to spend with.
We do here too. in North America.
And what we could achieve if people got the understanding of not just polyvagal, but internal family systems, more understanding and person-centered. You know, we could, you know, look at recovery, because we get what we would call they used to call it a revolving door syndrome. I don't know if that was what it was the case in America. And you know, and it's like they never ask the question about recovery. Why is it they keep coming back? Something's going wrong. So, but yeah, you know, and so it feels great to kind of, you know, with everybody around the world, kind of, it's getting bigger and bigger, and that feels positive.
Mm-hmm. I think there is a real movement that is happening now in terms of becoming more embodied in the work. We still have a long ways to go, but I think it's definitely shifting. It's definitely, there's something opening now, and it's pretty exciting time to be part of that in the trauma world. Yeah. Are other people here working as therapists? Most people? Yeah, I think a lot of people in the group are, but not everybody. Mm-hmm. So are you enjoying the group page? Do people really check into the group page? Yeah, we've got a huge number of people now. I think it's 540 people. It's really very, you know, as Gareth was saying, it's pretty hopeful, right? That we've got all these people that are interested in shifting the paradigm to really to an ANS paradigm, understanding all of our behavior and suffering, you know, through the autonomic nervous system is just so profound, especially when you think about what Steve always calls this intervening variable. You know, that there's stimulus and then there's response, but the intervening variable is the nervous system. It's what state are we in when we're experiencing life? And that determines how we feel in our bodies and what we think even. So that's just huge. And I think I find myself saying that all the time now, because it's just huge to understand that our thoughts are determined by the state that we're in. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? If you're in fight, you know, your thoughts are going to be angry. And if you're in flight, your thoughts are going to be scared. And if we can, the more we can come together like this and hold space and even just be quiet. And you know, that beautiful exercise of like gazing and seeing and connecting with other people's faces. And this really is such a profound way of shifting the paradigm. It's very exciting. If you haven't looked yet, the Polyvagal Summit is coming November 5 and 6. And it's going to be quite amazing, I think. 2 full days. I'm actually presenting on shifting the paradigm. So it's going to be fun.
Will you post how we can, you know, sign up for that if we're?
It's on the
'cause-
website, polyvagalinstitute.org. And
Oh, it is?
just on
Okay.
the front, on the opening, what do you call that?
Homepage?
The home page. Yeah, if you scroll down, the PVI Summit is there.
I guess I always go directly. I get so many announcements from our group. I don't go to that page anymore. It just
Yes.
clicks
me
right
too.
over to
Yeah, but
our
if you just
group.
go to the top and go to homepage, you'll find the summit.
Got it.
Yeah. Andrea, did you want to just say, are there more questions for Marika before we shift a little bit? So Andrea, did you want to just say a few words about your presentation next time so people will have a sense?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the heart mass system, which are tools and techniques for emotional self-regulation, for building up resilience, nervous system regulations, for And then for creating coherence, not within just within yourself, between your brain and your heart, but creating social coherence. And we're working on global coherence. So the HeartMath system is doing amazing, interesting research on how when you get yourself into a coherent state, which we'll go over a little bit, it does create that, that effect through your heart's magnetic field to people around you. And so as a practitioner who's working with other people, it is so important that we stay coherent and work on our own nervous system regulation. I was a school teacher and I got burned out because I became emotionally dysregulated. I was pouring out my heart day in and day out to my students, got sick, got emotionally dysregulated, and I didn't have these tools on the go to keep myself regulated as I was trying to put my heart out. So HeartMath has been really a game changer for me. And there's so much connection between the polyvagal theory and what we do. And we use biofeedback devices. You don't have to, but some of us need to see like the green, oh gosh, I'm in a coherent state. So we work with heart rate variability.
Right.
And by looking at this little monitor as we're doing it, we can see when we get our heart and brain syncing up, and then all these other systems start syncing up. You get your blood pressure syncing up and your hormonal system, and it's studies. I mean, there are 400 studies that they've done. So I'll be presenting some of the research and maybe just a couple of the techniques that might be really helpful to you next month.
Beautiful. So coherence sounds like it's the ventral branch of the vagus.
It's, they call it psychophysiological coherence. And so it is, it does include the ventral vagal system, but apparently the studies show that the brain, the heart will start syncing up with brain waves. And then they actually they've done these studies with monitors everywhere else, and they're showing that it's also syncing up with blood pressure. And then they've tested the release of a hormone. You start releasing more DHEA, you start releasing less cortisol. They've done just all these interesting studies, and the graph will show that it's really the smoothness in which you can go up and down from your sympathetic to your parasympathetic system. Instead of looking like this, you know, jag, like an earthquake thing, it starts going like this, more like a sine wave, which means that your body is able to adjust to its needs in a much smoother pattern, which then activates your brain. The HeartMath people have done amazing research. Somebody knows about it, yay. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. And it made the huge difference with my healing. So I'm training school teachers now, and I'm training healthcare workers. So I've moved into completely going back into the field that I left because of burnout, and helping them so they can avoid burnout. So that's really, oh, good. That's my love is teachers. I want to help the teachers.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it really speaks to, you know, remembering how vital it is for us as healers to really take good care of ourselves. Because, you know, I like to say we are our own instrument, right? It's us that co-creates together this capacity to make a safe space. And that means we really must take good care of ourselves and come together like this, right? And make relationships that can be really meaningful and deep. Gareth. Oh, nice.
Jen, there were a couple of questions in the chat just generally about the group. Someone was asking where to find the recording because they missed the beginning of.
Yeah, the recording will be posted like the last one was. It will be posted on the group page. I'll pin it at the top when we've got it, and that will will do that for us. And so in the next couple of days, you'll be able to find it, just like the
And
last one.
Someone wanted clarification about where the group page was and what it's called.
The group page is called Group at the top of the home page. Just look up Group, and it's the group for trauma and addiction. So I think there's 4 of them, and we're the trauma and addiction group.
And then the last one I
Annette
saw,
just posted it.
the last one I saw was someone looking for reassurance that they're not a therapist, but it's okay for them to be here still.
Oh, absolutely. The group page is not just for therapists. It's for anybody that is interested in working with trauma and addiction through a polyvagal lens. That's really that's our mandate is. It's through PVI, and Steve and Randall set up the groups and asked some of us to head them up. And it's for anybody who wants to be here. It's accessible for all of us. Absolutely. So that was wonderful. We had a really nice turnout. Thank you so much, Marika. I
Thank you
love
for having
somatics. And I really respect the way that you honor the lineage of your practices. I think we have a lot to learn about that. It's a pet peeve of mine. We really need to be careful about that, to honor where our practices come from and honor our elders, and especially as I'm becoming one. So it's not so bad.
Your book just arrived at my place today, Jan.
Oh, let me know what you think.
I'm excited to
I
read it.
love it when people email me and talk to me about it. Yeah, thank you for Lucy. Lucy sent me a picture of it when hers arrived. So, okay. Well, that was wonderful, everybody. Hope to see you all next time. And maybe if we interact a little more too on the group page, we'll invite new people. When you see, if you just go on every once in a while, I try to invite, like to say hello to everybody that joins. It's nice if we all do that, because then it just feels more and more connected and more like we're changing the world. Such important work. Sam is smiling. Sam is my graduate student. Yeah. Hi, Sam. Okay, everybody. Be well, be safe. Thank you, Marika. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Thank you, Annette.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you next month, and see you on group chat.